Hello, and welcome to the South Coast Artist Index, where artists, performers, and writers, as well as curators, directors, and supporters, anyone with ties to the creative community, drops by to introduce themselves to you. We'll talk about their beginnings, their vision, their passion, and so much more.
Hello, my name is Ron Fortier, and I'm your host. The Artist Index podcast is brought to you by the Artist Index website project, putting artists in their place for history. Our guest is a very special guest, and I'm going to let her introduce herself. And as with every guest on the Artist Index, I'll ask her how to spell and pronounce her name.
So my given name is Candace Lee Heald. The Lee is L-E-E, and I'm pretty much known as Lee Heald, sort of like one word. I'm also known as Mrs. Aha. It's funny because I have two sons, identical twin sons, who are now 26, and I'm actually a PhD. So when I was the mom in the neighborhood, I was called Dr. Lee. And for a long time, I had it on all of my frequent flyer cards. And I realized that when the plane went down, I'm actually not a medical doctor. I'm a doctor of adult learning, really. And so I thought when the plane goes down, all I'm going to be able to do for people is help them experience the whole thing. I'm actually not going to be able to medically help them. So a lot of people don't know I'm a PhD. So there you go. But I'm called Lee Heald. And I think Phil Paleologos was the person who gave me the moniker Mrs. Aha. And so when I introduce myself, actually, I will always say, I'm Mrs. Aha. And people laugh immediately and smile, which is a great reaction. And then I always say it's like being Mrs. Santa Claus because everyone loves you. And like all of the Claus family, you make a list and you check it twice. And that is kind of the ongoing formula of having a successful, ongoing monthly event. You make a lot of lists. You check them twice, and you make sure you've got all your details together.
Lee, what are some of AHA's highlights over the past 20 or so years?
There are 9 replication projects of AHA actually in Massachusetts, and it stands for Arts, History, and Architecture. When it came out of a program at the Regional Community Congress, which started in 1997, and the idea behind that, and there was a movement throughout the states. I think we copied Louisville. It was run by Bill Kennedy, who was the publisher of the Standard Times at the time, as a community project. And the idea was to involve people from all sectors of the community. So it was arts and culture, it was health and human services, it was the environment, education, business, and communities of faith, so 6 sectors. And each sector had their own kind of meeting group, and then we got together and did Walls of Dreams and all of the things that are popular at that, voting with colored dots and all of the ranking and that kind of stuff. And out of that notion, which started off really with the idea of regaining the idea of New Bedford as a hub of the region, and you see things like the South Coast region moniker coming out of that long term. But it was to sort of think about what are the relationships between all of the parts of this area with New Bedford, because historically New Bedford was the port, and there were foodstuffs and wood and ships and different kinds of articles coming into New Bedford, but New Bedford was the hub. And I think it was an effort to regenerate, which is a bit of a popular term, and regain that. And in the end of the day, AHA was actually the only project that came out of that. There's a little bit of the film festival that Culture Park runs, but I always said it was because the arts and culture meetings were so well attended. They were held at the Whaling Museum. We provided lunch, and you have to eat lunch sometime, and we actually still do that for the AHA meetings. It's a regular meeting every second Wednesday, and then we pretty much provide lunch, and so people actually come to the table, and it is that sort of notion of sharing food and sharing community that really builds the program over time. And I think over time, it has been a model for what are now called gateway cities, popularly known as gateway cities. And a lot of the Mass Development has TDI initiatives in the gateway cities. And this whole notion, the Irving Foundation writes about it, that the whole notion of the way that the Rust Belt or the cities that were superseded by both suburban and suburban development, these essentially manufacturing cities that kind of hollow themselves out and have problems with housing and education and infrastructure, that one of the ways that these areas are able to recreate, regenerate, fill up their souls is really thinking about programs that bring voice to the table, that think about inclusion, and really programs with arts and culture, because the AHA program never purported to be only professional artists or artists of note. We really looked around a continuum of K through 12 and a continuum of emerging artists. And I think that that is one of the things that has always drawn a strong professional core to the table, because everyone wants to mentor and connect and really think about their experiences over time. And so those kinds of cultural programs, so it's kids singing songs about their culture, it's the young Portuguese dancers that come out for Kids Rule, it's ways that people present their culture, and AHA is free, and most of the performers actually come to the table with gifts to give their community, and so it is this very receptive giving and sharing of culture and ideas, and it's a platform. It's become a community platform that people recognize, and that is one of the things over time that I think has helped not only New Bedford, but other communities like New Bedford rebuild their core. And over 20 years, the first AHA night was in July of 1999. Over 20 years, you see, when we started, we were part of a community economic development grant from Mass Cultural Council, and then it became very popular with Richard Florida promoting the creative economy and the creative class. And then once you really see these places take off, there's this whole notion that the National Endowment for the Arts, NEA, has promoted of creative placemaking. So now we're not just having cultural events, but we're really, I think in particular in New Bedford, changing the way people think about their area, changing the way the landscape looks, changing the opportunities. And 2 years ago, New Bedford was recognized by the Mass Cultural Council as the most creative community in the Commonwealth. It's a biennial award. And I say it's not that we are the wealthiest in the Commonwealth. It's not that we're Cambridge or one of those communities. But New Bedford was recognized as a community which has used arts and culture to rebuild its core, and the importance of arts and culture in the city's, not only the city's economy, but the city's psyche. That is what we are recognized for. And I think it's a distinct honor, and really looks at 20 years of community participation at all levels in the program.
Given the current boom of artists within the South Coast creative community, the amount of art being made, coupled with a lack of commercial galleries, do you have any idea where art is being sold and shown?
That's a big question. I was still I think the Star Store is one of the anchors of downtown. And while AHA predated those things, I think that all of that administrative energy was in the fore, and the same people who sort of were the backbone of getting AHA going, I think were also the backbone of the things like the Star Store, Senator Montigny, Bill, and the National Park with Tony and Elsie and the same kind of crew. So we always want to give them recognition, the well-deserved recognition. I think it's an interesting thing, and so I'm intrigued, I think, with the things that are going on in downtown New Bedford and the wider regions, and I think it's a good development. It's a little tricky to parse out, because in the larger society you have everyone saying retail is dead because everyone's on Amazon. And that's dead because everybody's shopping this way, and whatever. So I think that in the wider world, you kind of look at how people buy, sell, and the Etsy moment. I do think that there's something that is unique and special about arts and artists, because it's not always a commodity. And of course, there's a range of craft and up to quote-unquote fine arts. It's always tricky. It's not so much a commodity, it's a relationship. So I think that New Bedford has absolutely been in the right place early. I mean, AHA was the sponsor of Open Studios originally, and then it went off on its own. I think that Hatch Street is doing some great stuff with sort of not only spaces to work, but ways to meet artists. And then Ropeworks has places to work, live, and meet artists and see their works for their open studios. And so I think that there's that whole range of relational pieces with arts and artists, and that's important not only for the retail component, but for the health of the community and the connection. People are sharing studios and co-branding and co-marketing. The Coming Studio downtown just had a whole big thing about people who want to collaborate and show and do pop-ups. People like Allison Wells, who has a very successful gallery downtown, usually has pop-up people, so she's usually featuring someone else. The Art Museum does that. And so I think that there are a whole range of relations and permutations, I guess, of ways that art is created and marketed and sold and connected. And, UMass and the CVPA, the Star Store, really focuses on kind of marketing and knowing and being out there. They've done some really interesting work this fall with the Local Ecologies Project, which is largely community connected, but very well funded by foundations and grants. And if you look at some of the work, I'm on the board of the Art Museum, so I say that, but the Creative Courts project that's been done with the Community Foundation's Creative Commonwealth project, that is money coming in from the outside to commission and do fabulous work in the community. And then you have the Wicked Cool program from the mayor that is for largely programs, but again, the visual and performing artists, so that there are performing artists and musicians, and they're also funding a basketball court with the artists. And so I think there are lots of different ways that art is not only sold, but that art is funded. And I think what's coming new to New Bedford is that whole notion of the audience for your art is not necessarily the individual consumer, and that art will go off into a private space, but that there is a funding opportunity that supports artists so that work can be held in common and in public. So the mural at Ben Rose and the murals in Wings Court with Superflat is doing a great amount of work. Yeah. And so I think that as we're just on the cusp now, we're on a funny cusp, right, because you would ask me about retail, and most people are thinking about public art. And so New Bedford's interesting because it still supports retail and galleries in that sense. And then it has places like City Hall has a gallery that's a non-market gallery because it's a display gallery but not a sales gallery, although you can see the person and sell. There are all these permutations of, Green Bean acts as a gallery, right, Poor Farm acts as a gallery. And so I think it's a very fluid environment and space. My guess is it depends on your medium and your age in terms of your comfort zone, what you're producing, and your customers. For someone like Bob Duff was at downtown, then left, then came back, and is now kind of in his own private space again. Mm-hmm. I think that people have come and gone. So I probably haven't answered your question, but those are kind of my thoughts around. Those are my thoughts around how it's happening.
Yeah, as far as commercial galleries, it's probably just we've seen the end of them. We're going to alternative spaces, hybrid spaces.
And in New Bedford, so if you ask that same question, I think, of someone who's on Cape Cod, where not only is the search for what they're buying very different, but the financial backing of that is very different. So it's a price point. So probably if you're looking at certain places in Florida, Martha's Vineyard, Nantucket, the Cape, I would say North Shore, I think that you'll find pockets that the traditional gallery culture is doing quite well. And then I think that you'll find pockets in New York, and I've just gotten back from Boulder, which is alive with fabulous galleries. That, part of it's economic and part of it's kind of taste.
Yeah.
So, but I think New Bedford is this really interesting mix of evolving public-private partnerships as well as artists who work in public and private spaces.
What will the next 5 years bring to the AHA table?
I think it's a great time to be in this area because New Bedford has one of the few unspoiled, really, 19th century port views. And so we're talking about arts and culture, but we, as a community, are still, the leading fishing port for value of catch landed. There's a lot of industry coming in. And so I think New Bedford, both in terms of geographic location and topography, really has a huge advantage over places that have been overdeveloped too soon. So particularly for the arts and culture community, I think it's very, it's exciting. New Bedford has attracted the attention of funders and funding, which is a credit to everyone who has worked so hard over time. There are several institutions doing capital campaigns to improve their physical infrastructure and their offerings. The National Park remains a great partner for all of the things we do and gives us national recognition. Lee Blake's work with the Underground Railroad has really brought distinction to the community in a variety of ways. So, I think New Bedford is really, not only has it arrived, but it's poised to do more and interesting things. And what I love about it is it's a really diverse and inclusive voice. And I don't see that changing because I think the past 20 years has given both permission and motivation to the people coming up, the 30s and the 40s, to really stand their ground and be productive. And most of the people I have seen and worked with are enormously community-oriented and dedicated to New Bedford. It's not a way stop. New Bedford seems not to be a place that you pass through on your way to something better, different, whatever. People get caught and really fall in love or grew up here and it makes sense to them. And so that is one of the, I think, amazing things. And we're always promised the train is coming through. So yeah. Well, there you go. So that still seems to be on the table for 2023. And I think that there's a huge amount of opportunity. And I see great leadership. I think that people are very conscientious, both from the university level, from the city political level, from the economic development level, from the community foundation and philanthropic side of it, from the cultural organizations that are up here. I just think the leadership has been smart, fashion forward, and has really positioned New Bedford to continue its trajectory of success without losing the vision of inclusion and community voice. And that's something that I am honored to be a part of.
What do you see for AHA and New Bedford specifically in the future?
For New Bedford, I see.
And AHA, because one is the other. Is
I see New Bedford with increased opportunities. I would hope that the opportunities that we see on the street connect with the population growing up here. So, I have high hopes for, K through 12 opportunities for the kids to stay and be here, and to be able to. Every community wants the kids to be able to stay home and make a living and not have to go away. And so I see that not only in New Bedford, but kind of regionally. So that would be one of my hopes, because I think that that's one of the markers of a good economy, that it's multi-generational and inclusive of all in a way that provides that kind of thing. And I know that it's a mix of education and economic opportunity, and that arts and culture aren't going to fill that niche necessarily. But it's part. Well, it's part of the. It's always part of the frosting on the cake, and at some point it is part of the cake also. I think more and more there's opportunities. That's not maybe a fine artist, maybe a graphic artist, maybe maybe this, maybe that. You're in advertising. There's a lot of art in the advertising business. There's a lot of, and there's so much that's transportable now. So New Bedford, I think, is still relatively more affordable than some other markets for live work, and so I think that that's increasingly interesting. I was on the when I went out to Boulder, I was on the plane. I always talk to people about what they're doing, and it was a young man who lived in Iowa because it was so affordable, and and told me about the house and the kids and the but he runs the marketing department of a fairly substantial mail order house, but he comes to Boston once a quarter and runs the rest of it out of his house. And he said, you take a Boston salary and you put it in a down market, down home environment, and you're doing really well. And I think that particularly if a train comes through, that New Bedford has a lot of opportunities to be one of the within an hour's commute opportunity. It's one of the last ones that's not developed because we haven't had good public transportation. If one more meeting in Boston says, please take public transportation, you sort of say, I'm on that. Yeah, I'll be with you in a while. So I think that that's going to be a huge opportunity for New Bedford to grow. AHA, we're in the middle of kind of doing some strategic planning and transition planning because we think, as you say, we've been flexible and mobile, and we kind of want to be the best service organization in some ways and best connector that we can be. And we're kind of looking and doing some community interviews to sort of help us think through what's the best way to be useful to the most amount of people and to kind of be able to maintain that open community platform and move forward, because the nature of platforms changes. Right. And so we're actively thinking about that. We have a good team working on it. So, I don't know the answers. People always say 5-year plans are actually 2-year plans that you think about. You wish for 5 years, but you've kind of, every 24 months or every 3 years, you're kind of re-envisioning yourself. Things are changing very rapidly. It's a moving river. Yeah, and I think being able to embrace change and embrace the opportunity in change without losing your values, because I think the values that we have are critical about what we wanted to do with New Bedford and where we want to be in New Bedford and how we wanted to be in New Bedford. I don't think that those values and our mission have changed. We've orchestrated a little bit differently, but and we've changed up the graphics and the look a little bit. But our core values, I think, will stand us in good stead. Good.
What would you like to be remembered for?
I'd like to be remembered for working with AHA and fostering a collaboration that made a difference. And my elevator speech would always be, AHA contributes about $1 million yearly in earned revenue to the community. We are diverse, we are inclusive, we are free to the public. We offer people an opportunity to give gifts. We have been a great brand for New Bedford over time. We have been at the forefront of really thinking about how to work collaboratively, develop a relationship of trust, develop a narrative that is New Bedford, and really stick our flag in the whole notion of creative placemaking in a public event. And I would like to be remembered in conjunction with that collaboration.
What are some of the AHA moments, some of the highlights, or some of the individuals that helped AHA over the last 20 years?
There have been many individuals who have contributed mightily. I will always say that. But I think the fun thing about AHA is it's really collaborative. So we have 70 partners. People have come and gone from the street, as it were, because we're really dedicated to the folks that are there 24/7. And so I think of some of our major themes. I think that Kids Rule, which is the July theme. So every month is a different theme. And I should backtrack to say, at the time that AHA started, there was a hope. It was before the national park was up and going. It was before the Star Store was up and going. So, I mean, walk back in history with me. Right. And there was kind of a hope that New Bedford would be known for more than whaling. And as always, and as still, the Whaling Museum occupies a large and important place in the community. But particularly then, less so now, it doesn't tell the whole story of everyone's expectations or hopes. And so there was a hope that we would be, I always laugh that we went over and scouted Providence for gallery night. And we came back and think, well, that's really interesting. But we actually, at that point, didn't have enough galleries. It took us about 11 years before we could actually have a gallery night. And so we came up with this idea of themes. And so the early years were pumpkins or this or that. But it was a way to, again, invite people in to participate. It was a way to think about arts, history, and architecture. It was a way to kind of level the playing field a little bit, so it all didn't have to be about big things you knew about. And the funky themes over time have been ways to allow different kinds of groups to enter into the conversation and be part of the mix. And so the Kids Rule theme has been fun every year. July, it's kind of, we mark it with the camps and the schools. It's a way to have families come down and really think about the resources of New Bedford throughout the time. One of my favorite months still is May, because it's We Art New Bedford, and it is the time that we host or co-sponsor with the public schools. So New Bedford hosts the largest school child student art exhibition in the Commonwealth each year. It's been between 35 and 3,000 pieces of school kid art at the Roderick's building, and it draws about 3,000 to 5,000 people and families. There's music, there's award ceremonies, and it's really a way for us to share and to highlight and to sort of think about pathways to get people involved in the community, and to kind of think about New Bedford as coming way down, all the way down the hill, because as you know, the Roderick's building was built on Charles Morgan's homestead, and his front lawn looked all the way down to his ships on the harbor. And so it's that wonderful kind of connecting piece. And the Seaport Cultural District has just been really expanded to sort of think about that whole space. So, I mean, I think of in April is the Earth Eve Parade. And so we have the Commonwealth's largest people-powered parade. You wear it, you push it, you pull it, you drag it. And we have about 17 floats. We have the middle school marching band. It's their field trip. Domino's always feeds them pizza on the front steps of the library. So, I mean, I go from month to month, and each month has real highlights of fun and expectation and different kinds of audiences and different kinds of voices. And so I really think about the collaborative views. I think that we've been able to pull off and bring some different events to the downtown that were not as highlighted. We've done stuff with fiber arts. We've done stuff with some stuff with Frederick Douglass and different cultures in New Bedford. September usually highlights the different cultural voices of New Bedford, the Cape Verdean music and Portuguese cultures. So, I mean, we've kind of looked at what the opportunities are for I used to work at Plymouth Plantation, and we'd always say that the street is really made up not only of the William Bradfords and the John Aldens, but the average pilgrims. They're just the normal people. And I think that that's one of the strengths of AHA, is that it's a community spirit where it celebrates people where they are and what they want to bring to the table. And the themes kind of change up and let that be possible.
Yeah, I mean, it's diverse and inclusive. There's no complaints there.
Never has been. We've. I would knock on wood, but it would disrupt the sound. But we've been very fortunate, and I will say that we've always been family friendly. And when you think about the conversation that exists in contemporary society about free speech and free rights and free this and free that, all of the artists have always been. All of the performers have always been, all of the participants have always been enormously respectful and concerned about the fact that from 5 to 9, it is totally and absolutely family friendly. And they have self-edited and self-monitored the content, because they say, we want everyone to enjoy and feel comfortable downtown. That is our gift. And so we've been very lucky. There's stuff, it's so funny because now we have AHA after 9. When we first started, there was nothing after 9. There was, people rolled up their carpets, but we began to see eateries and bars kind of advertising music on AHA night. And we thought, oh, well, fabulous, because after 9 is a whole different vision. And so now we advertise AHA after 9, which is not necessarily the same criteria for family friendly. I mean, remember that 20 years ago you could smoke in the bars.
Yes.
And so the bars used to be non-smoking on AHA night because they were supposedly family friendly from 5 to 9. I mean, over time, we've seen such huge changes in the downtown landscape and the downtown opportunities. So we've tried to stay up and say, oh yeah, no, we'll capture that AHA after 9, Thursday night, absolutely.
So after 20 years, how have things changed, continue to change, continue to evolve, and currently are continuing to progress to another step and level?
Mary Jenkins, who was our program officer for 19 years, we were the longest continuously funded project for the Mass Cultural Council by the time they sunsetted the Adams Grant. And they actually at the time said if all of the grants ended up looking like AHA, we'd still be going. But not all of them situated themselves in ways to be as impactful, if I can use that word, in their communities. What she always said was AHA's like an amoeba. You sort of look at it one way and then all of a sudden it's shifting and you kind of sort of look at your audience and then you're in another place and you've done other strategic partnerships. And Carrie Cox from Medium Studios and I always talk about, when we started out, we were all print media. Mm-hmm. The social media, the internet, and we've really shifted over time. We're cognizant of which audiences look at which kinds of materials, but I think in general, that flow, it's a whole new generation. When we had been going for 16 years, I was at a Sherpa teen focus group around public transportation. And they asked the question of the kids what they did and what they wanted to do when they came downtown. And it was clear at that time that more of the kids knew about and had been to AHA than any of the other cultural pieces, which is not to diminish the other cultural pieces, but it is to say, it occurred to me at that moment that we have raised the first generation of kids who think of it as their birthright to have this fabulous cultural mix, not just AHA, but all of the other programs that are going on downtown and in New Bedford, that is really their sense of their identity with the city and the opportunities that offers, and the connections and the branding. It's kind of a cool place. And so as you kind of go through a generation of understanding, the people who started out with AHA, I think we're here to build community and sort of prove some things. And I think this next generation has a very different sense of what the opportunities are in New Bedford, because there's a lot of entrepreneurship going on in New Bedford. There's lots more funding coming into New Bedford for arts and culture. There's a lot more emphasis on connecting with youth opportunities and youth groups to get them connected in, the mural that's just been done at Ben Rose. And there are so it's really spread out as both an understanding and an opportunity. And AHA tries to keep up with that because we are still the recognized community platform that's open and free and predictably every second Thursday. I'm very proud that this year we were recognized as one of the top 25 things to do in Massachusetts. And we were actually ahead of Fenway Park. So, that's good. Yeah, no, I'm sticking with that.
Lee Heald, thank you very much. We'd love to have you back real soon.
Oh, well, thank you for talking about AHA.